My brain was going, don't trust the instruments. You're going to die. You're going to die. It felt like the jet was plummeting to the ground. I was about 2 seconds from plugging in the burner, pulling back. And if I'd done that, I think we would have crashed.
What can a fast jet pilot teach us about making the right decision when every instinct is telling you to do the wrong thing? It starts with knowing when not to make things worse.
So in an emergency, sometimes doing nothing is counterintuitively the right thing to do. Even in the most extreme emergencies, a second isn't really that long. You can actually regain a lot of situational awareness in 1 second.
Welcome back to the Optimizing Human Performance podcast. The voice you just heard was Air Commodore Robin Caine, the head of the UK military flying training. Robin is a former frontline Tornado pilot with more than 30 years experience flying, instructing, and leading in some of the world's most demanding operational environments.
In fast jets, you can kill yourself if you wait for perfect. You might slip out of the basket and not have a decision left. So you've got to be able to make good enough decisions to be safe, to win the dogfight and come back and do it the next day. And if you're waiting for perfection, you're waiting to get shot.
The principles that keep fast jet pilots alive can help all of us make better decisions. This is a conversation about pressure, judgment, and developing people to perform at their best. Enjoy. Hi, Rob. Welcome to the Optimizing Human Performance podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and thank you ever so much for having me on.
It's my pleasure. I'm sure we're going to get into some really interesting topics today. Before you introduce yourself, I'll tell people you're a fast jet pilot, and I want you to, can we go straight into a story? I would like you to tell me about the scariest thing that you've ever experienced as a fast jet pilot.
So the one that I would probably leap out at is the one where I almost lost the back end of a tornado because it had melted about 1300 degrees on a turbine blade temperature fire. That's the one that sounds the most dramatic, but actually the one that was most scary is when I was flying in Scotland on night vision goggles, and I was in formation with my friend MSJ, and he was doing an approach into Lossiemouth, and he couldn't see the runway. We were trying to recover visually with night vision goggles on, of course, but it's pretty dark and pretty wet out there. And he went, "Oh, this is not working. I'm going to pull up into cloud and we'll shoot off and do a radar approach." All very boring, all very straightforward. We pulled up, we started a right-hand turn, and we were in this dark cloud. So even on night vision goggles, you can formate very closely next to your mate. So there I am in a tornado. My backseater's a very experienced weapons instructor. And normally, like the red arrows, you can hang on formation with a number of references, like where you are relative to the nose, the wing, the tail, and you're always scanning across that. Well, I'm in this cloud and I can just see the line of the wing and just this flash. And because it's under goggles, it's just a green flash. And that's all that happens is like green flash, and I can see the line of the wing. And as we're doing this climbing right-hand turn, I then lose the wing and I just get the green flash. I've got no other references about closure. And then suddenly that light goes. And the light goes because although I'm right next to him, the cloud is so thick, I can't see where I am at. Now, this is completely normal. So what I do is I can't stay safe next to him, so I roll away. So we've got standard procedures to get us out of formation if you can't see each other. So all I do is I go 20 for 20 for 20 degrees away for 20 seconds. He's still climbing, so I level off. And it's at that point I have this thing called a somatographic illusion. Basically, the otoliths in your inner ear are telling your brain something totally different from what is happening. And what it felt like for me and my navigator was that the jet was plummeting. And I don't mean just falling, plummeting to the ground. And at the same time as we both felt this, my backseater's going, "Pull up, Rob, pull up," because he feels we're going to die. And my brain felt exactly the same. And I've never felt anything quite like it. It was terrifying because I was literally going, "Oh my God, if I don't plug in the burners, pull back as hard as I can on the stick, I'm going to die in the next couple of seconds." Now, we get told a really simple mantra, which is aviate, navigate, communicate. And the first thing is aviate. And when you're learning how to aviate, they say, trust the instruments. So while my brain was going, don't trust the instruments, you're going to die, you're going to die, I literally went, I'm going to go on to the instruments. And I looked at the instruments and it shows that I am steady and level at 2,000 feet. And my brain's going, how can I be steady and level at 2,000 feet? I'm not even turning. I'm not even descending. My brain was completely confused. And all at the back, he's about to eject us. And I managed to realize that this illusion was happening in my brain. It's killed lots of pilots. And I managed to talk my backseater down and say I was in control and I was straight and level. But I think I was about 2 seconds from trusting my flying by the seat of my pants, plugging in the burner, pulling back. And if I'd done that, I think we would have crashed. And even in that last couple of seconds, when I knew what was going on, my backseater was still not convinced, and I had to really work hard to persuade him that I was in control and he was suffering from this illusion as well. It was absolutely terrifying, completely benign, incredibly terrifying.
It sounds it. It sounds it. I'm going to come back to that because I've got some questions. But before I do, can you introduce yourself properly? Now we've got that scary story out the way. Can I hand over to you to tell people who you are, maybe a little canter through your career to where you currently sat?
Yeah, of course. So my rank in the Air Force is Air Commodore, and my role in the Air Force is the head of UK military flying training. So I look after Army, Navy, and Air Force flying training of any kind you can think of, whether it's helicopters or mission aircrew in the back of helicopters, but also through DCASO, the Defence College of Air and Space Operations. We train people to be intercept officers, space officers, and operations officers, air traffic controllers. So, in other words, if you're touching aviation in the military, me and my team are helping you get along to the front line to fly, fight, and win. I've got about 32 years behind me. It sounds ridiculous. I was that little kid who wanted to join up and be a pilot, and I haven't really changed much since. I was very lucky. I went on to Tornado, both GR1 and GR4, flew out of Germany for a little while, became a frontline pilot and did a few tours of operations over various different places, and then became an instructor, both on the Tornado and then later the Hawk. And I spent a lot of my time teaching tactical weapons, so teaching people how to be fighter pilots. So how to dogfight, how to fire weapons, how to strafe, how to do close air support. Lots of great fun. As my wife tells me, not a proper job for a living. And so since then, I've done a little bit of command and control, which was a bit more like a proper job for a living. And now doing this job as the head of flying training, definitely not a proper job for a living. Great fun, helping the next generation.
That's awesome. And do you mind sharing your call sign? I know you've got a call sign in the RAF. Do you mind telling the story of yours, Rob?
It's dreadful. And I'm not trying to get away from it either, because actually it could be a lot worse. So the Americans all have call signs that they get awarded and they use airborne. We're still in 1939, so we use nicknames. You use a call sign airborne. So if I was OC4 Squadron as I would be Ninja 1. So that's fine. That's all right. That sounds punchy, doesn't it? Well, to your normal listenership, I apologise now because my nickname in the Air Force is Puppy Caine. I'm Puppy because I'm massively enthusiastic about what I do. I was when I was 19. I still am. So it doesn't matter about the nickname. It does describe me relatively well.
Yeah, it's a good nickname. When I've heard people refer to you as Puppy, it kind of takes me a moment to think Puppy, and then I realise, I know who you're talking about now.
What's terrible
it's
is
unique.
when I'm in certain jobs, when I was director of operations, you'd be sometimes in quite serious meetings, and the people who were the core of those meetings knew you as Puppy, and you didn't have to explain it because it had been explained. But when these crisis situations happens, you go from maybe 10 people in a meeting to 100 people in a meeting, sometimes at top secret level. And the people who are in the core of the meeting chairing it are still calling you Puppy, and the other 90 people who've just joined and never had that introduced go, "This is insane. Who is this guy?" So it's a difficult one, but you just have to live with it.
It's a good name. It shows your enthusiasm. That's it. That's the main thing. That's awesome. Let's go back to your story. I'm interested about that moment where you're communicating with the guy in the back seat who thinks you're gonna die, and you have to tell him effectively, calm down. What you think is happening isn't happening. Can you explain how do you do that when there's such immense pressure? How do you communicate?
It's a great question because I think you sometimes come back to these frameworks that help when your brain is saturated. So not only did aviate, navigate, communicate save my life, trust the instruments save my life, but clarity of communication, whether you're Patrick Lencioni talking about business or clarity of communication on operations on the ground, on the sea, or in the air are all absolutely the same. And I really like a phrase they use, which is action information control. So if you're going to say something and you don't have much time, you've got to get the most important bit first. So if you're about to shoot at me, I don't want my wingman to go, Rob, it's 2:10 and we need a cup of tea. I want him to shout, break right. Not, there's an enemy behind you, break right. Break right. Tell me the information I need to do first. Information, flare, there's an enemy behind you firing at you. And then control, where do we go next? So when I was in the cockpit trying to talk that situation into a fully developed idea, the first thing was to go, action, I've got the jet, we're safe. I am flying the jet, we're safe. So that the only two sentences that came from front of the cockpit to the back of the cockpit were, I'm in control of the jet, we're safe. It didn't have to say why we're safe, how we're safe. And then the information bit, we're flying at 2,000 feet, we're steady level. That's cool. And then communication to my friend MSJ in the other jet, we're out of formation, so you communicate that. And to air traffic control, you say, we're steady level at 2,000 feet heading this direction. And now those words are things that the navigator understood and could then come back into more slow, realistic, analytical thinking, because his emotional side had already been activated and needed to be talked down.
Mm. Under those extremes of pressure, what I hear from other people, I've experienced it to a degree in my own life, but when you get this massive overload of adrenaline, you are life and death. You at that moment where your body is screaming at you that you think you're going to die. Sometimes it's a lot of the things that people think are going to work just don't work because they haven't trained them properly. They've not embedded the right sorts of thinking. What was your initial reaction? Like your body speaking to you, how did it feel in that moment, and how did you switch from almost a reaction into a response?
Again, I think you framed it really beautifully there, because everything's going to come through your emotional side first. And I felt exactly the same as my backseater. It was visceral. I've never really felt anything quite so visceral, where you could feel it in your guts. You could feel it in your legs. They say flying, when you're doing it by feel, is flying by the seat of your pants. So that feeling about how the aircraft was operating for me at that time was that it was out of control. I mean, literally just it had fallen off a cliff. That feeling as if you were in a roller coaster and it just goes over that massive hill and you go down. That feeling of plummeting, that's how it felt. And I think that the framework that helped me was the just sit on your hands. So in an emergency, if you don't know what's going on, don't make it worse. And so sometimes doing nothing is counterintuitively the right thing to do. Like the British Army are famed for having a cup of tea whilst rounds are going over the top. And what they're really doing is lowering the heart rate and assessing the situation slightly more calmly. They might not have a cuppa, but what they're doing is they're sitting on their hands, but it could be a second. But a second isn't actually that long. Even in the most extreme emergencies, a second isn't really that long. And you can actually regain a lot of situational awareness in 1 second. And by doing that and maybe taking a breath while you're doing it, that really helps. You can then just look around you, and then your brain quickly picks up on the key bits of information that you can then move into subsequent actions that are going to save your life. And I really love that. Daniel Kahneman talks about thinking fast and slow, type 1 and type 2 thinking. And I think the Air Force had it without really knowing what it was yet. Now we do immediate actions and subsequent actions. And that is, for me, we call them bold-face drills. So immediate actions are always bold-face. That's where your instinct comes in. You just do it because you've trained it into your system. Once you've done that, you've stabilized the situation. And sometimes that immediate action might be doing nothing. Then you can step into the type 2 thinking, the subsequent actions. But I think the more I've flown, the real sort of glue to that is metacognition, the understanding of how am I doing whilst I'm doing it. So you might want to do an immediate action that feels really, really legitimate, like pull the jet back, put the afterburner in. But your metacognition is is that right? Does that feel like it's the right thing? And you can have those. 1 second gives you enough time for your brain to kick in. And I think that means you can balance between fast thinking and slow thinking, immediate actions and subsequent actions because it's balanced by this metacognitive process.
Yeah, I love that. There's in the field of insomnia, there's a model. It's called 3Ps model, and it's trying to explain why some people have insomnia. And I feel like it applies to other pressure situations. The 3Ps are predisposing, precipitating, and perpetuating. So it's the things that perpetuate the problem. So with insomnia, sometimes the things that we try and do to make our sleep better perpetuates the problem. And I sometimes think we can apply that model into other pressure situations, that the initial reaction can sometimes make it worse. You just perpetuating the issue because you're grasping at that high emotion. Your body's screaming at you. You just you react, and it's not necessarily the right thing. It's being able to, I call it driving a wedge in, where you're having to slow things down. You drive a wedge in between stimulus and response, and try and find a different response that's gonna be task relevant. Let's call it that. Not necessarily good, but it's just more in line with what you're trying to achieve.
And I think your task relevance is really important, because some people will listen to this conversation and say, oh, it only matters if you're a fighter pilot, it only matters if you're in the special forces or on a ship or in a sub or in space. How many of us have had an email from someone we work with, probably with a long distribution list to all your bosses and all the most important people you work with, and your professionalism is impugned completely incorrectly, and your first reaction is emotional, and you press reply all, and you start typing vigorously on the keyboard, and you get to the point where you're typing and another thing, and that's where your immediate action should kick in, because the emotion will be there. Before you press send, your immediate action kicks in going, maybe I should sit on my hands on this, maybe I should just wait. Then your subsequent action, you go, oh, Si, can you come over and just read what I've written? And they go, dude, don't say that. Don't send that email. So immediate
I've seen many of those emails in my time.
Yeah. Or that moment you have that argument with your spouse or your partner, and it's exactly the same thing. Decision making is everywhere all the time. And so this little framing that we use is a really good way of just taking your metacognitive part of your brain and allowing it to work properly.
Yeah, sure. For the people that are not fast jet pilots, which I'm guessing is pretty much 100% of our listeners, or at least close to it, I think we might have one or two on there. I imagine most people, I know I do, I think of Top Gun. I think of like the film Top Gun. It's what I watched as a kid. It's what, people have watched over and over again. They think of the character, the confidence, the control, the fearlessness, all these different things. What does being a fast jet pilot actually teach people? Take away the Hollywood. What does it teach people about handling pressure, about communicating when things are on the line? And what are the core lessons that you feel like your experience can teach people who will never sit in the seats that you've sat in?
I really like the way people view Top Gun, because they think it's reality. I've watched.
It's not.
I know. And what they need to do is watch Hot Shots Part 1. Now that was a documentary.
Good films. Yeah.
But I think the bit that is really good about Top Gun is it just shows how dramatic and high tempo it can be in a fast jet cockpit, and how many different people are involved in supporting you when you're in that role. So I think fast jet aviation is much more akin to being in a rugby team, where it's not about being a Formula One team where there's one or two drivers and 200 engineers. You're in a team of teams. So you might be in the forwards, you might be in the backs, but you've got a huge bunch of coaches who are supporting you. But you always operate together. You always operate as a team, even if you're single seat in an F-35 or a Typhoon. You're always working together. So the boring bit of that is, I think no human being can cope with the data saturation and the environment that you're in all the time. Almost every pilot I've ever known has reached a point called max out, where you just run out of capacity. And even if I said, what's 1 + 1? They'd go, and come up with the wrong answer probably. Now, ultimately, I think what we've done over probably about 110 years is worked out a framework so that people can operate to a good enough level to be safe and effective. And that framework, we probably didn't realize, was baked in with tons of neuroscience, lots of psychology, and lots of fantastic decision-making theory. We just didn't know it. So when we were talking about the flow state in an athlete to these days, everyone knows about that. But if you talked about being in the mission bubble, or the bubble as we talked about it, where you minimize distractions and you get yourself to a highest level of confidence and competence so that you free up your capacity, well, we were doing that in the 1930s. So actually, we didn't know why we were doing it, but we've had this structure. And I think it's based around like the Combat Edge program that we're trying to improve how we get people ready for this very complex front line they're going to face today. It all, for me, comes through 4 slots. And that would be how you prepare, how you perform, and how you review afterwards. And then I think the extra little bit that not many companies do is learn and adapt. Those 4 phases. Most companies and people do 1 or 2 pretty well, hardly ever do 3, and almost nobody does 4. I think we are trying to do 4, and we're doing lessons identified more than lessons learned a lot of the time. But that whole loop, that whole cycle, if you do it day on and day in, you're going to improve. You're going to have an improvement in your ability to make decisions in complexity and under pressure. And so after a few years of doing that, somehow it becomes a lot easier. And it doesn't matter whether you're dealing with risk management on operations, driving your car, or making decisions about life. There are some really key aspects of that: prepare, perform, review, adapt, and learn, that is really, really important.
Can I play devil's advocate or maybe push back on a challenge to you?
Please.
If I'm involved in a company, so sometimes if I do a little bit of corporate work outside of the defense sector, and I've introduced similar sorts of frameworks, and the thing that I get that they push back is yes, but, and it's yes, but in the military, you spend 80% of your time training, 20% of your time doing, or arguably 90% training, 10% doing. When you work in a private equity, a bank, a law firm, it's the other way around. Look, we do, and we get 1 day a year training. When you apply those sorts of models that you've introduced, how realistic is it in a time poor environment? How do you do it when you don't have the luxury of a lot of time to train? Is it still applicable?
Yeah, it is, but the model doesn't have to look the same everywhere you go. And I think checklists are a really good example of that. There's a brilliant book called The Checklist Manifesto. It's written by a surgeon who says checklists are really good for medicine, but most people in medicine don't want to use them, despite tons of evidence showing that they work. And that's because we try and apply a military aviation checklist approach to medicine, and it doesn't quite fit how they work. Exactly like the debriefing cycle or the learn and adapt cycle doesn't really work in high tempo banks, for example, or on the trading floor. It doesn't if you just cookie cutter it and then apply it as if it's the same environment. Context is everything. So what I would suggest, though, is if you're never doing a review of what you're doing on a regular basis, and you're never doing the learn and adapt phase of adjusting, all you're doing is building strategic drift into your business. And what do we see? 2008, strategic drift had happened over years and years and years, and we end up with a crunch. If you look at Kodak, when a digital engineer came in 1975 and went, "I've invented digital cameras," and they went, "Shut up, you're going to ruin our business." And then, because they let that strategic drift happen, because they didn't do those last 2 stages, you can continue very successfully until you can't. So, of course, you can operate in that manner. But what I do absolutely agree with you is that how you do it is going to be pertinent to when and where in your world. And you could do a really quick wash up, a hot debrief on almost anything you've just done, whether you've just made a trade in the city. I was with Citigroup recently and they do some incredible work there. Or you've just run a management board. Why don't you get the top 4 people to sit around literally for 5 minutes and just go, how did that go? What's your gut reaction? What do we need to take forward? Now that is what we are doing more and more in my world, that I didn't see a lot of that before. Everyone talked about the meeting over a coffee, but no one ever really did a formal hot debrief or go, I think you need to change that next time. I think you need to change that next time. You just need to do maybe that 1% everywhere. And over a day, a week, a month, a year, you will end up with a vastly different organization.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The high performing organizations that I've been involved in or observed, have that consistency of that system, that like how they, like you say, how they do it is not necessarily the same in every organization, but they have the consistency is the same. They do have a system. They follow a process. It's interesting that the checklist as an example. I was working with a group not that long ago around a particularly difficult selection process, a job interview of sorts. And I said to them, well, what is your system for when you are under pressure, you're about to go and talk in front of people and deliver something under a lot of pressure? What is your system? Have you got a checklist? How do you remember to take things with you? And it blew their mind. And I was like, it's a checklist. I'm not talking like advanced neuroscience here. This is pretty old stuff, but yeah, people just don't seem to recognize the value in some of these really simple tools.
And isn't it funny? What people want is a silver bullet, but what they want is a silver bullet that looks really interesting. They want a silver bullet that somehow is something that they've missed all their whole lives. So I'll give you a good example. If I said to you, here's this great bit of technology, happens to be an iPhone, but this technology is going to solve everything in your life. You can buy that because it looks complicated. There's hundreds of applications on there, and it's quite expensive. You're like, oh yeah, I'm here. Here's £1,000.
Take my money.
Yeah. And it doesn't really change your life very much. It probably complicates it. But if I said to you, here's a checklist, or maybe some breathing techniques and mindfulness, I can breathe. I don't need to do any of that. And yet, there's some fantastic science out there that shows one of our biggest problems today is attentional control. And yet, one of the only ways you can improve your attentional control is regular mindfulness. I think it's called Peak Mind by Professor Amisha Jha. And she's written a brilliant book about it. And it's not technical. You're basically saying, for your brain to succeed, you might need to do a bit of breathing and you might do a bit of mindfulness. And actually, if you're doing one or the other, you're probably doing a bit of both. It's not rocket science, but it feels a bit boring. And because it's a bit boring, it's not as interesting as that iPhone. People don't do it. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's so true. The cornerstone of probably, I'm even going to say 100% of the work I do it's self-awareness. So the first thing that I start with almost every single time is self-awareness and understanding your own internal world, your thoughts. Where are your thoughts? Where are your emotions? How do you feel? What are your signals of pressure or stress? And that is mindfulness. We've had a few mindfulness episodes on the podcast, and I think a couple of people have nailed it really. Jutta in the first series, this idea that it is just paying attention to things, that is mindfulness. We're not talking about yoga retreats necessarily. Can be great for some people sometimes, but we are talking about in the moment, just being able to draw your attention, shine the spotlight of your attention onto your own thoughts and recognize where they are. I think that it's such an important skill.
And it's underrated because it feels so simple. I think that self-awareness, and also the self-awareness how other people work around you, like the Johari window, that I think is really important too. So it's all about not only leading self, but leading others. So it's being aware of self and aware of others. So lots of psychological tools to help you do that. But again, most people don't like looking at the mirror because it can be uncomfortable. We all make error and we are all imperfect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd like to come back to talk about Combat Edge, but before I do, I just want to pick up on one of the things you mentioned earlier on. You were talking about clarity, and you kind of made the idea or suggested that, some people maybe have it, or the RAF have had this for a long time. Is it a personality thing? Is it something like the clarity of thinking, clarity of communication? Do you train it or do you select for it? What are your opinions around this?
Probably threefold. I think there are some people who are born with some skills. I really like Matthew Syed's book Bounce and kind of going away from the idea of talent. But maybe through nature and nurture, there are people who have a higher learning curve in areas than others. So for me, DIY, I'm absolutely terrible at. I could spend many years learning and I'd still be roughly okay.
Yeah.
Whereas my father-in-law, John, is absolutely amazing and is just really, really savvy at doing that kind of stuff. So, but there is that inherent element that people arrive with. I think selecting really well for that talent is really important. So I don't think I could do special forces stuff. I might not be the best astronaut. I'm a pretty good pilot. I'm probably not a very good rotary pilot, but I'm a pretty good fast jet pilot. There are different skills involved. So I like to be selected for the capabilities that I'm showing. But I then absolutely do believe that you can maximize people's potential. So if you do that properly, you can probably take anybody and make them pretty good at what they do. To make them world beating, you need to have all three of those elements sewn up. And so one of the frustrations I have is that I think we recruit and select pretty well, but we have a vast amount of data about how we could nurture talent that we don't really use at the moment. And that's one of the things in Combat Edge we want to get after, is using some of that data and some of our judgment, both sides of that equation, better as we develop people. So I definitely think you can make people better. And comms is a really good one with clarity. You can engineer communications to be better. You can understand when you're not producing clarity of comms. But as Patrick Lencioni says, the very first thing about communications is establishing trust, because then you can talk openly about what's going on. If you haven't established trust, then what you will talk about won't be the real things that are going on. So establish trust and then have a good communication process. So action, information, control. We've got a whole raft of things called 3-1, which is how we talk on the radio, for example, and you train for that. So it's calm, clear, and concise. But ultimately, there is a process there, but you should still be really involved with it and go with it.
I'm glad you said that, because it sounds real. It sounds honest. It sounds like what I've experienced as well. I've had some discussions with people who will say that they don't want to train the psychological components of performance. They'll happily train the physical. If you've got someone who there's a physical employment standard and you have to do so many push-ups or pull-ups or run in a certain time, they're happy to give someone a program to do that, to get them to that standard. But as soon as you start saying, let's talk about, the phrase mental resilience, we have to make people more resilient. Well, if I have to train them to be more resilient, I don't want them. So I like that you're embracing this idea that you can still make people better, even if they're, some individuals I think are potentially being lost from certain selection pipelines because they've got massive potential, but they're being selected for a skill they haven't learned yet. It's not that it's not they can't learn it. It's just they haven't had the experiences yet. And give them 10 minutes, give them 10 weeks, they might be, the most resilient person there, or they've got the skill set, but they just need somebody to just help them realize that potential.
And someone as well qualified as you are, you'll probably go, Rob, it's really basic, so don't use it. But I really like Tim Galway's equation: your performance is your potential minus your interferences. Now, I think my job as a head of flying training is to, one, if someone thinks they've got this potential, actually they might have a little bit more potential than they realize, because there will be a self-limiting belief in there. Likewise, there's a whole bunch of structural interferences. The computer network's not very good, the infrastructure's not very good, there's not enough airplanes, or there's not enough air traffic, or the food's not brilliant. Those are interferences that I systematically should be getting rid of. And I can't do everything, but also it's that mental side of interference that almost always is the part that limits performance. So our job, I think, is to get rid of the interferences, whatever they are, so performance and potential are broadly the same. And most of the time, we're fixing as much of the structural stuff as we can. So the mental side, I think, has the largest degree of influence on outcomes. And it's not just making it up. A few years ago, probably about 4 years ago, we unfortunately had a very high wastage rate through our training system, particularly on fast jet. There were a number of different reasons for it, so it's never as simple as just one thing. But nowadays, the last 3 years or so, our wastage rate through almost every pipeline is the lowest it has ever been, because we're taking a more people-focused approach. And the standard of people hitting the front line isn't going down, it's going up. So it's not about being nice, it's asking difficult performance questions and helping people remove those interferences, mental, physical, structural. And that's what you clearly do every single day.
Yeah, I call it faulty processes. Same thing though. Interferences, faulty process, same thing. Like there's a similar model. I think it's Steiner's model of group productivity. Same thing. potential. It's a productivity equals potential minus faulty process. Exactly the same. Yeah, it's a thing that's a lot of the time it's a thing. Well, I like faulty process because more often than not, it's the thing you think is going to help, but it's a faulty process. Sometimes it's an intentional action that, heart's in the right place. You think it's doing the right thing, but ultimately it's creating an interference. So I think what you just talked about then definitely resonates with the work that I'm doing.
And I can tell you, I know what that faulty process feels like. When I was on the Tornado, I had done my frontline tours. I was coming back to be an instructor. I was instructing on the operational conversion unit, and I got the opportunity to be on the Qualified Weapons Instructor course. That is a very, very highbrow course and very intensive for about 6 or 7 months. Very long hours, very complex work. I was going into that as the course leader. I already knew a lot of the stuff as an instructor on the OCU. So I thought, it's going to be really hard, but I'm going to put my all into it. And later on in the course, I actually really, really struggled. And I actually failed that course with 1 week to go in front of all my peers. It's a really bad thing to happen in your career. And it took me about 2 or 3 years to get over it. I then did the Hawk Weapons Instructor course, passed that. Which is not as complicated as the Tornado one. Some people will call it the plastic QI course. I'll take that banter all day. But ultimately, you're doing the same sort of stuff. Now, why did I fail that first one? One, because I think there were some self-limiting beliefs. Two, I probably didn't have the experience necessary in some key areas. But also, when the pressure started coming on, I started doing some faulty processes. So I just worked much, much harder and slept much, much less. And guess what? When you're working far too hard, you're missing some of the detail and you're missing some of the wider things that are happening around you. And also, you're so worried about decisions, you start to lose confidence. And if you lose confidence, you act slower and you definitely do not proceed at the pace of relevance. And more importantly, because you've got no sleep behind you, you actually know your performance is going to drop off a cliff. Now, those were faulty processes. I just didn't know them at the time. So I didn't realize that experience of failing was the thing that was going to teach me to do faulty processes better in the future. Still not perfect because we're human, but better.
Yeah, absolutely. The word perfect there, I want to just go down a little rabbit hole. My experience of the fast jet world, which is relatively limited, just an outsider looking in, you kind of get this feel of perfectionism, that it's a place where only I want to say the very best, the people who are doing things as close to perfection as you can get it, are the ones that get through. I also know people who work in this environment, and they tell me that's not true. So, what's your case? What's your take on that idea of perfectionism in this world?
So, I have flown over 2,500 hours, most of them in fast jets, over 32 years. I have never been involved in a perfect sortie, not once. I've actually not been involved in a perfect plan, a perfect brief, a perfect execution, debrief, or even the learn and adapt phase. Not once. And I think all we can strive to do is strive to get better each time. So I don't think we'll ever reach perfection. So it's almost pointless talking about it. But we should always be striving to get better at what we do, maximize our potential and our performance. And so I think we live in a world, I really like it because it drives this open, honest, and transparent approach where, because it's so dangerous, you've got to be really open about what you did well, what you did badly, and what was really ugly that might have got everybody killed that day. And if you're not, then you're putting more and more risk into the system. So when I first joined, sadly, and I do mean this very sadly, we were losing either a fast jet, multi-engine, or a helicopter every month with a fatal accident. And we were going to those funerals. And you're going, well, it's just the price of doing business. And I didn't think we were, cavalier. Everyone was really professional, but it was just, we're doing dangerous things. It must be because we're doing dangerous things. And then the Haddon Cave QC investigation into the Nimrod disaster in Afghanistan, where needlessly, unfortunately, we lost 14 lives, transformed how we do business and how we looked at risk. So instead of having an 8-day period, not even working day, 8-day period in my life on the Tornado, where 2 of my friends were killed in a Hawk in Yorkshire, My station commander banged out, was almost killed in the bang out of a Jaguar Lossiemouth. And then two of the guys on the squadron on the weapons instructor course were unfortunately killed in an accident in a tornado. That was an 8-day period. And what was weird was it actually wasn't that uncommon. Now, thankfully, because we do things in a better way now, those accidents are much more rare. And that still doesn't mean we're not doing hard stuff. We are. I think we just have a slightly more intelligent approach about how we do it. So that open, honest, transparent strive to improve, knowing you're never going to reach perfection and being really honest with what's going on, it does change your world. So perfection is never going to be there, but being open and honest about how you can get better and look really open and honestly at the problems is the way to be better.
Yeah. I sometimes find that perfectionism thrives in areas where there's no standard. What I mean by that is it's hard to know what good enough is. So people create the idea of what good enough is, and they strive for something that's way beyond the requirement. I've had people say to me before going on certain arduous courses that they want to get to a point where they can deadlift 300 kilograms and run 2K in under 5 minutes. Just crazy standards that no one's told them that. They've just created that in their own head. In organizations that have a standard and it's clearly articulated, it tends to drive perfectionism down, I find. Is that true? How have you developed those standards? How do you communicate those standards so that people are kept to the right level? So knowing when enough is enough.
So I think we've got great processes: standardization checks, simulator rides, testing rides, weapon instructor checks. So things that kind of is dip check to where you are at. And the standard is high. We do expect to get a lot from people, even when they're saturated. I think also because in fast jets, you can kill yourself if you wait for perfect. You either fly into a hill or you fly into your friend, or you do not reverse at the right time in combat. Where I have unfortunately had to fail people on very complex training courses where they might have been in flying training for about 3.5 years, right at the end of that process is generally when they're waiting for perfect. And for me, I really like this idea called decision points. So if you can think of, everyone kind of knows that if you're playing a computer game like DCS World on fast jets, there'll be a max range for a weapon. So before that, I can't fire it. And there's a min range for the weapon. But once I get to that point, I can't release it anymore. It won't get to the target anymore. It will go somewhere else. So there's a bubble, isn't there, about where I can and cannot make a decision. And there's an optimum point. That optimum point right in the center of the envelope is where I'm going to get the best effect out of what I'm trying to do. Now, we have those kind of envelopes everywhere in life. And the decision point is the optimum, because at that point, you still have choice. And you can still have choice after it, but the outcome is already worse. And if you get to the decision cliff at the end of it, you no longer have a decision. The environment will make the decision for you. And I use that all the time. Am I at decision point? And if you're waiting for perfect, you might slip out of the basket and not have a decision left. So you've got to be able to make good enough decisions that will be there to be safe, to win the dogfight and come back and do it the next day. And if you're waiting for perfection, you're waiting to get shot.
Is the good enough something that you train, or do people learn that through experience?
It's a bit of both. And I think you have to learn through experience. That experiential part of teaching and learning is so important. I can tell you, I can show you in a dogfight, for example, when to do a high yo-yo reversal. And there are 3 key things you need to know when that's going to happen. And I can show you on an air combat maneuvering debriefing system like Top Gun, and you go, oh, I can see it. You can see it from inside the cockpit, outside the cockpit. I can show it in a sim. You might be able to fly it perfectly and recognize it perfectly. But then you put a helmet on, you go airborne, half your brain falls out, and you cannot make decisions in real time. And if you wait for perfect for when those 3 things have happened, and they're all subjective, you're already dead. So you have to go, we call it TLAR, that looks about right. So I love that. It just looks about right. And if you're going, oh, I'm going to wait for it, that looks about perfect, you're already too late. So that looks about right is often good enough.
Yeah. I was at Cranwell 2 years ago, I think. I was talking at a conference up there, and I was in the line for a cup of tea, and I was talking to one of the instructors, and he was talking about simulations in particular, and about the difference between, as you talked about, that moment when you're actually flying, something goes wrong, and you feel like you're about to die, that you never get in a simulator. That you can learn lots of things in simulators, but you will never get that true fear of something that's going wrong. How do you deal with that?
You have to have live flying. I mean, ultimately, that's what you have to have. So a lot of people will talk about live synthetic ratios. So 70-30, 50-50, yada, yada. I think it's a complete anathema. You have to have the synthetics to do the reps and sets, and also to explore the boundaries that I wouldn't want to do with my body involved. So I actually might do some really dangerous stuff in the sim that I can't do live, that I would only ever do in a proper war environment. Or for operational security, like the F-35, you can't operate stealth completely in the live environment. So you're going to do all your fighting training, high-end fighting training in the sim.
Mm.
But I think you have to have that synthetic environment. But you're quite right. There's a bit of your brain just back here that goes, this isn't real. So if we go back to that very first story where I was in the tornado at night and I felt the whole jet fall away from me, in the simulator, one, you can't generate the same sort of cinematographic illusion, but even if you had it, it would not be as visceral. It just can't be as visceral because your brain knows that it's not. Now, when you do it in the air, that very normal moment suddenly becomes terrifying. And that's why I still think live aviation is the gold standard, because you can only operate against the enemy in the real environment.
Yeah, I think that's, I absolutely agree. I was talking to that particular instructor, I was kind of saying the same sort of thing in sport. If you use a sport as an example, you don't expect Premiership rugby players to play matches every single day. You do run throughs on the training field. You do things in the gym. There's lots of different things that are arguably simulations of the game, so that they spend 80 minutes playing the game, and you can ramp up the pressure, and you can do friendlies and so on and so forth. But still, that component of training, it's in every single sport. And yet I sometimes get that pushback a lot in the military, that it's simulations, we should be doing more real live stuff. So, well, I'm not convinced. It's expensive more than anything, isn't it? I think that's
It
a
is,
problem.
and instead of going, what's the ratio, I would just simply ask the question, what's the best way to train a pilot? What's the best way to train a rotary pilot? The best way to train a fast jet pilot? Oh, by the way, you've got these bits of kit to help you. Well, why wouldn't I use all of those bits of kit to the highest degree possible? And that's going to come up with a certain ratio at the end of it. But instead of trying to engineer a ratio that's not connected to learning, and I think time is one of the most important things for anybody learning how to do anything high performance. If I give you a BMX bike and I get a Tour de France bike, but I can only ride mine once a month and you can ride yours all the time, after about 4 days, you can ride that bike and do stunts. And if I took the bike off you, in a month, I could give it back and you probably know how to ride it. Whereas I've only had one go in my month on my Tour de France bike, and then they take the bike away from me, they give it back to me in a month. I can't ride it, I can't do stunts. So having opportunity to do reps and sets doesn't actually matter that the fidelity of the bike isn't very good or the capability of the bike isn't very good. It's my access to learning and rapidity that is the most important thing.
Yeah. It's a good analogy, because I've seen many a road cyclist fall over a traffic light because they've forgotten to unclip. So yeah,
That's exactly it.
That's probably what's happening. That's probably what's happening. One of the things that I'm always really impressed with the RAF is the willingness to reach out to other areas and other expertise and bring them in and learn from other people. And I think your organization does that really, really well. Combat Edge is probably a good example of that. So, well, in a sentence, can you tell me what is Combat Edge about? What's it there for?
In one sentence, it's a holistic program that looks at every facet of people in the system to get them better and make them elite decision makers so that they can fly, fight, and win. Not fly, fight, and lose. And if we do that properly, not only will it make the training system more efficient and effective, because I will get more people through the system, but their quality will be better and they will stay in the system longer, and there will be better people at their back end of their service as a result of that training.
What problem was it there to solve? Like when you originally came up with the idea, or the people that were around you, or maybe before you, who came up with this idea, what was the initial problem that it was trying to fix?
So my friend Mike Jordan, who runs our rotary wing training, said we train really well, we don't develop really well. So I think you're talking about, hands on throttle and stick, the ability to fly an aeroplane, we do pretty well. But the non-technical skills that your friend of mine, Dr. John Alsop, works at our Central Flying School, the non-technical skills, the ability to make decisions in complexity under pressure, I think was okay for when we were over Afghanistan. It was okay for when you were flying over Iraq. But I think if you're looking into the future, very complicated future that we have got in front of us, they are having to deal with a much more potent enemy, a peer-on-peer enemy. And they might be flying over Syria one day, the Black Sea the next day, over the high north the next day, and doing QRA over the UK in 4 or 5 days. Now, that complexity is more than I had to deal with when I was growing up and learning how to do my job. So we needed to find a way to develop our people to solve that problem. And likewise, we do not have all the cash that we would like to buy more aircraft or have more airfields. So I need to get more bang for my buck out of the training that I do. And to do broad maths, I generally train around 120 RAF people. There are Navy and Army, but this is just the easiest maths. I train about 120 RAF people a year to get 90 out the back door into fast jet, rotary, multi-engine, and RPAS aircraft, remotely piloted aircraft. That's quite wasteful. It's actually a pretty good failure rate over the whole system compared to most of my NATO allies. But I'm training 30 people who really, it's not going to be good for them, and it's not going to be good for us. Combat Edge hopefully will get us to a point where I train 100 people to get 90 out the back door. And that's a far more efficient and effective training system. And with people who are going to go out with far more capability to get the most out of the F-35 or the Typhoon or the Tempest in 6th Gen.
Can we dive a little bit deeper into the actual program and what's in it? Like what did you choose to put in it, and why?
I think the first thing is the kind of bit that we talked right at the beginning. Psychological skills training used to be delivered by aircrew like me. So I'm not a psychologist like you. I don't have the smarts. And although we did some great performance coaching for aircrew, and it's important to have that operational understanding of what it's like to be in a cockpit and fly around, we were really kind of amateurs doing some stuff. So now when you've done your ground school and you've finished some fantastic human factors training, you will go into psychological skills training with a chap who I know was on the show before, Professor Dave Collins, who runs his company Grey Matters. So he and his people are in delivering training at Cranwell. And then once you've got a bit more experience at RAF Valley on the fast jet pathway, so that you're getting psychological skills training in decision-making theory, how your brain works, how all that performance and potential is related, your self-limiting beliefs, to give you a framework of how you can operate more effectively in future. We then also complement that with enhanced instructional techniques, which we're teaching to the staff. So they need to understand how they coach and mentor in a better way and how they teach in a better way.
Yeah,
and also,
great. That was a great course, incidentally. I've sat on that great course.
And what they should do is link. So Danny Kerry from UK Sport has been advising us a little bit. He runs their elite coaching cohort. And you have to have the same psychological language across the team. And if you don't, the instructors are talking over here and the psychological skills training students are over here. They have to be talking the same language. So that's really important. We then have to take advantage of our brilliant instructional cadre so that we are upskilling them on how to coach and mentor and supervise them, provide people like yourselves who have the skills as a psychologist or a level 7 well-trained and accredited coach to provide the supervision and expertise to my level 5 coaches who are the aircrew instructors who already do that kind of work, so that you've got a level of both supervision and assurance above them. So we're not going over here and getting out of control, and we're not doing nothing because it's not appropriate. So everybody in our training system, all our students, are getting good coaching and mentoring. The final part of it is the opportunity in technology and data. It's a human-focused approach. So of course we're going to do high-performance fizz and sleep and breath control, HRV, lots of things like that. But also we're awash with data we do not use. And so we need to find better ways to use the data in a high-performance way and increase the judgment that our experts, our instructors use every day. So we're going to a high-performance assessment strategy in September, which changes how we mark our students. It just gives them a little bit more latitude to explore when they need to invest in their own performance. Whereas before, at the moment, you can only give someone extra training when they're failing, which is daft. You wouldn't do that in the Olympics. You're investing in them up front, so you're ahead of the drag curve. And it will make the training system more efficient and effective. Our instructors will feel more empowered, and our students will feel more valued.
Yeah, great. It's a great program, and it reminds me of some work I did 20 plus years ago in youth sport, where you look at kids and you can apply what's called like a medical model of development or a positive youth development model. And deficit model is you only do something when somebody's showing a problem. So you help a child who is in need of help. They've failed something. Their behavior is not what you want, and those are the red flags. So then you come in and you help them. The flip side is the positive development program is it's based on the assumption, well, just because you're not injured, you're not ill, you're not broken, you're not failing, doesn't mean you can't get better. So we approach everybody, we try and raise the standard of everybody. And then ultimately what the research showed over time was those deficits started to go away and like almost unintentionally. They were just a happy byproduct.
Yeah.
You know, we've been doing this in youth development for years and years, and it's music to my ears that kind of thinking is becoming more prevalent in these high performance worlds as well. It is great.
Proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. Yeah. Proactive programs versus reactive programs. So in 5 years' time, where do you want to see the program? What's your vision when you're maybe not in the seat that you're in at the moment, and you've passed it on to one of your colleagues? But where would you want Combat Edge or similar interventions to go?
So I'd love it to be almost unrecognizable for me. I look at my Singaporean colleagues, and they've got a program called Pixel, very similar. And their leader, their head of flying training, his nickname is far better than mine. He's called Triple X. Like, how cool is that? He's a lovely guy, F-16 pilot. He reckons that 20% of the things they're trying in small group tryouts, so before they really invest, they do these small group tryouts where they test it out, see if it's worthy, and then they bring it into core. 20% of their stuff is failing. I think we should be in the same space. We need to be trying stuff out. It might be how HRV can be used in training and talent management and recruitment selection. I don't know whether that's viable. The Israelis, the Shell of Air, have used it a little bit, and there's some good studies on it. But we don't know how we would use it yet. And we might use it and we might not use it. So in 5 years' time, I want loads of these small group tryouts to be really pushing on the boundaries of what we do. But down the spine of it, I still want to have the same high performance structure that we've had going back to when the Royal Air Force first started, when the Army Air Corps and the Royal Navy do their stuff. They're all fantastic organizations. So that core, the resilience and the capability and the training and the development are still there. But the little bits of innovation that can drive change will be there, so that we're getting the best of business, the best of Formula One, the best of Sports UK, the best of education and medicine. And if we fuse that, what I'd love to see is that all those organizations are coming to the Royal Air Force and UK military flying training and going, wow, how comes you've got the best high performance environment in the world? Now, that is a real ambition. I don't think we're going to achieve it overnight, but that's what I want. And we can only get that by thinking more laterally and coming to those worlds and saying, how do you do it? Because our core product is already really good. So if we layer on those things on top, I think we could be cooking on gas.
Yeah, I love that. I love the ambition. I think I'm looking forward to see how it plays out. I've seen bits and pieces of it, and I think it's an innovative approach to training and helping people get better. One thing that I'll share an anecdote that I've experienced more than once. Having a foot in both camps of working in certain areas of defense and certain sports organizations as well, I will often get the sports organization will say, we do X, Y, and Z because that's what the RAF fast jet pilots do. And then I go to the fast jet pilots and they go, we do X, Y, Z because that's what that rugby team does. And I'm sat there thinking, well, neither of you are doing it. And they're like, you don't understand what either of you are doing. You assume that's what one organization does. Do you have that? Do you have people just come to you just expecting your world to be just the slickest, the best, and then you kind of try and go to other organizations to learn from them? Is that, how does that play out for you? Do you ever have those paradoxes, I guess?
The first one is to say, I've just set out a senior officer vision that is clearly not going to happen, and everyone will think I'm mental. So just being honest, I know that there's lots of people in my organisation, maybe 48% of the people in that organisation will be sceptical about this approach. I don't need them all to be perfect. I just need 52% to think it's worthy and change. And over 5-10 years, this is a long process of change. And in that, we will make mistakes. Of course we will. There are times when people come to us and expect perfection, and it's not going to be there. There will be things that basics we're getting wrong right now. And there are things that we're doing to an outstanding level. But going out to different sports and learning, and I think that link up with Sports UK, with other members of the community that you work with, that is fantastic to do, because why would I tread on the mines that they've already tread on? The sports science and the literature and the research is really, really mature. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to use it properly. And that way, if I do take that into account, I think that is where we're going with the Combat Edge program. But I spoke to a lovely guy called Richard Hunswick recently on a podcast.
Yeah, I know Rich.
And he's unbelievable. There's some core tenets that are the same everywhere. It's just doing it is hard. Actually, you said consistent. Doing things consistently is really hard. And actually getting to a consistent level right across the organization is probably the most I can hope for. Yeah. And if we do that, I'll be very, very happy.
Yeah, awesome. I guess one last question. I know you're a busy man. I really appreciate the time you've given us. It kind of leans into what you just said then. People like Rich, as coaches, worked in high level sport. In high level sport, there's very few teams that don't have a coach. There's very few athletes that don't have a coach. It is just part of the course. You know, I remember in tennis as an example, when like Nick Kyrgios as a professional tennis player didn't have a coach. It was like, well, you know, what are you thinking? This is craziness. Why would you not have a coach? If I go to high-end military organizations like yours and other similar ones and suggest that as an elite operator, as a fast jet pilot, you might need a coach, you just get the straight arm, like, go away. I don't need a coach. You know, I'm already at the top of my tree. You know, why do I need coaching? And I know the RAF have done really big things around performance coaching. You know, why do you think there is that culture, and how do you overcome it?
So that is a big part of Combat Edge, in the fact that we did performance coaching for aircrew, and we kind of stopped it in 2017 when we lost that supervision, assurance, and some of the control over it. And it's easy to chop. It's uncommitted money, and you can quickly go, I need to save some money. I'll save it there. I think we could do okay.
Yeah, I think that was the right decision. You know, when you lost assurance and governance, I thought that was a brave move, and I think that was probably the right thing to do at the time.
I absolutely agree. I think it was the right thing to do at the time. And when we do put it back in, if we lose that supervision and assurance, then we're not going to get it right, and it'll get cut down again. And if we can't show the return on investment of putting 27 £1 million worth of not wasted investment in and getting 9 more fast jet pilots out the front door, which is what we've done over the last 3 years, if we can't demonstrate that, we need to stop doing it. But it all comes down to the culture. The reason we had performance coaching for aircrew is you got it when you were failing, reactively. So in other words, we go, oh, Martin, are you doing the coaching? Oh, yeah, I find it really useful. Oh, because you were failing, were you? You were on air warning 2, were you? Yeah, I was failing. Yeah, so that's why I've got it. We need to reverse that. So now it's going to be coaching for excellence and coaching for dominance at different places in the training pipeline, so that everybody is going to get an opportunity to access coaching. Some people might still not want to do a lot of it, because you have to have people who want to get involved in that. So I'm not going to mandate it on everybody. I'm going to mandate that everybody tries it. But I guarantee you, in the future, when everybody's getting coaching and we've got to this more proactive assessment strategy, I'm going, I think I'm much better than Martin. But Martin's getting coaching and he seems to do better than me now. Martin, how are you better? Oh, I'm doing this coaching. It's really useful. I think I'll try some coaching because we're all competitive. So it's changing the zeitgeist. It's changing the culture around it. So you're getting, it doesn't matter whether you're the best or the worst. Everybody's trying to move the bell curve to the right. So everyone's performance is higher.
Awesome. Great. A great way to finish. You've listened to this podcast before. You know what's coming. So I'm going to offer it back to you to wrap the episode up and give us some top tips or some words you've not mentioned yet. Before you do that, though, if people do want to learn more about you, about the work that you're doing, is there a way of people following the work of Combat Edge or just keeping an eye on the RAF human performance more broadly?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and one of the things the Air Force has given me the opportunity to do is talk more about what we're doing in flying training, to confront some of the bad media that it has had previously, and to be open and honest about what we're doing. So we do that. We try and put some good media stuff out on both LinkedIn and other channels like RF News, podcasts like this. I think it's really important. So follow me on that, and I'll be very, very grateful and happy to chat to people. I think the final bits of what I might say about sort of things that I think are really important within both my leadership style and also an organization. If you want to be high performance, I always think you have to be proactive, collegiate, and helpful. And what I mean by that is proactive. We've talked at length here about being reactive. It's not good. It's just not a very powerful place to be. But collegiate and helpful seem to be the same things. Collegiate means that when you're inside an organization, you're all trying to help each other. The Ubuntu phrase of we're all good together, we're all going to rise up together. And helpful, if someone comes from outside the organization and asks for assistance, your initial reaction should never be just to put the phone down. You should always be paying it forward to other organizations. And what you're doing by being collegiate and helpful is you're making your own luck. Good things lead to good decisions lead to good things, and the reverse is true. So I think if you're proactive, collegiate, and helpful, you have far more chances of success. The culture will be better. You will have higher levels of trust. And as a result, people will like working together, like working with other organizations around them, and you will all go further and better.
A great way to wrap the episode up. Rob, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. As I say, I know how busy you are, so I really, really do appreciate you coming on today. Thank you very much again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
That was Air Commodore Robin Caine, and what stood out for me most in this conversation was how many of the lessons from fast jet aviation can apply far beyond the cockpit. Trust the instruments, sit on your hands, communicate the action first, and don't wait for perfect. Learn to review properly and to adapt. These are simple ideas, but under pressure, simple doesn't always mean easy. A huge thank you to Robin for giving up his time and for being so open throughout this conversation. You can find him on LinkedIn, where he shares more about the UK military flying training and the work that he's been doing through Combat Edge. As always, if you found this episode useful, I'd really appreciate if you could take a few moments to follow the podcast and leave a rating or a review. If you know someone who's striving to perform at their best or helping others to do the same, then please share this episode with them. Thanks for listening to the Optimizing Human Performance podcast. I'm Martin Jones, and I'll see you on the next episode.